Welcome back, everybody. Episode 204, Two Chaps, Many Cultures. And today, expanding on what we've spoken about before in the logistical side of moving people around the world and what they have to consider. Today, we're going to dig into the deeper weeds of the cultural preparation. And we're going to talk about being mission-driven and the evolution of how providing those services have changed. Think about, a space mission, rocketing yourself into excellence in the culturally. Don't get burnt by the afterburners and boost yourself into whatever. We're going to try and fit a whole bunch of stuff, silly
metaphor master,
I love it. Into this episode. Stick around. Yes, welcome back to the number one show on the business of culture and the culture of business, where culture is barely enough.
Barely enough.
How are you, mate?
Don't get burned by the after. Okay, what are we talking about here? Have you been spending time in Elon Musk's space camp? What's going on?
Yeah, Richard Branson. That just seems to be the nature of the day. If you've got a few spare bucks in your back pocket, you build yourself a rocket and off you go to space, which is kind of nice.
And that's what you did this summer, right? Because this program has made you into a self-made billionaire. And this, okay,
that's
great.
right. That's right. We're using because we finished the two Chaps towers. I mean, the executive suite's all done, especially the gold-plated toilets. We are done, all of that. But anyway, seriously, yes. I mean, I think that's a good metaphor, isn't it? I mean, space travel, the whole idea of building a mission with a whole bunch of people and all that kind of stuff. That's a pretty good thing. A bit of a metaphor.
That sounds terrific. And by the way, it's also money well spent, I think, in considering everything else this planet is going through. This is exactly where you want to put your money. Well done.
Absolutely. Right? Well, in this case, I think it is a good investment. The cultural preparation and the evolution of such, and how things have changed in how we provide those services and how they're provided by companies that do provide those services. We got a special guest today, waiting in the wings. Special guest from the wings. Yeah. See, I did that again. Right here from local in Chicago, Mr. Jesse Rowell, Managing Director of Global Mobility at Aperian Global. How are you, sir?
Hello, two chaps. I'm well. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, it's quite an official acceptance. Thank you very much for being here. It's lovely. It's very spiffy.
Pleasure is all mine. All mine.
Good. You sure you know what you get yourself into?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
No problem.
Great to have you on here. Thanks for stepping out of your rocket ship to join us for a little bit.
Absolutely.
Brett, you called this episode mission-driven, or you made that part of the headline: global mobility, moving people across the globe, driven by a mission. Let's put some meat on the bones. So for those of the folks out there watching, what do you mean by that, or what do the two of you mean by that? And maybe I should get out of the middle so you guys can cozy up with each other.
Well, no spoiler alert. Jesse and I know each other quite well. We live not far from each other. We have been known to get together for an ale or two, and we talk about this extensively. And of course, Jesse, you're with Aperian Global. You lead the global mobility practice. And I guess as we work together and we've seen the evolution of global mobility over the years in terms of the delivery of culture, delivery of cultural understanding, and I've used that term cultural empowerment intentionally. As I've heard you describe it to clients and such. So in kind of a few kind of elevator pitch words, how do you bring cultural empowerment as a mission-driven part of the work you do?
Yeah, I like that intentionality, Brett, with that. So hi, everybody. Jesse Rowell, as Brett said, with Aperian Global, and been with that firm, which is a very mission-driven intercultural consulting firm, going on 14 years now. Last 5 or so, supporting our practice area that supports international assignees and their families. And I think, to answer your question, Brett, that there's a misnomer when that word training gets used for intercultural coaching or training. It's more transactional. It thinks I need to do a few things of protocol issues. How do I give gifts? How do I hand a business card? And that sort of diminishes not only the work that we do as interculturalists, but the impact of what culture means to those assignees on assignment. So I like empowerment because if you can understand how you work in your host country, and obviously you're probably chosen because you're very successful in your host country to go on assignment to represent your company somewhere abroad, you could be your normal best self, but your normal best self could backfire in some cultures where you have different style differences. And training as a misnomer, you don't want to check the box. You want to really embrace the different styles that we all have, and it becomes very genuine and authentic. And when you understand those things and you start, as we say, style switch in those host countries, magic happens. The assignment succeeds, you make lifelong friends, and your work benefits because they've got an ambassador that understands how to navigate the nuances of international business. Yeah.
Well, it's fantastic. It's encapsulated beautifully. I mean, it's a good elevator ride, but I mean, and as we've worked, and Christian and I both work with people on the pointy end of this spear, so we get to be with people, and I think that this approach is really kind of going through an evolution over the years, right? There's the part about giving more context and more meat on the bone to the just not the the best practices and that kind of thing. But the other thing is that I think that it's the delivery, it's the expectations, the preparation in amongst the craziness of moves that with all the other things that you have to do in moving you and your family across the other side of the world, it is inherent on us to understand the person as trainers and coaches, and to also kind of give them some context about how it's going to affect. So that's great, fantastic. So Aperian Global, just tell us a little bit more about Aperian Global. We've had previous guests from Aperian Global, Mr. Ted Dale, talking about his experiences. And so talk about your role and how you came to work with Aperian Global. And I always like the story about how kind of culture was lit up in you, Jesse. What was your past experiences that brought you to understanding how culture is such an exciting part of our world?
Yeah, we all have our stories about how we got into this field that we're all passionate about. I admit I did not know intercultural consulting or training was a thing. I didn't even know that existed, right? And so my background is I'm originally from outside Atlanta, Georgia, not far from where Christian lives. Grew up on a farm there and didn't even have a passport until college. So kind of lived a parochial but amazing, simple lifestyle. And then I go off to university in Atlanta, big city, Georgia Tech, and went from thinking I knew everything to I don't know much at university, and I'm now mediocre. And I remember asking my dean, how do I stand out to set myself up for a career? And she was like, do you know another language? So I ended up taking some time off and doing a study abroad in Ecuador to learn Spanish. And probably we all have a similar aha moment. But for me, it was living abroad as a young person that I knew once I got through the crucible of homesickness and being scared to I didn't want to come home. And like, how do I have a career around this? But my goodness, that was a long, long time ago. And I didn't know intercultural was a thing. So for me, I just wanted to get into international business, and it took me a while. I had a corporate job with IBM, and I could not find a way to get into their international side. So I went to grad school to get an international MBA, and that sort of helped push things in a direction that was where I wanted to go. So I had some great jobs in my 20s doing international partnerships, reseller arrangements, very kind of business development focused. And my goodness, I learned a lot, but I'm sure I made a ton of cultural mistakes because I'm going all around the world, sometimes weeks at a time, and having the time of my life, making lifelong friends. But I didn't realize probably some mistakes I was making of how I bring myself every day. And it wasn't until I moved to Chicago, this is 2003, 2004, when I needed to find a new job, and I stumbled into this Aperian Global gig. And I remember going, I've never heard that this is a thing, but wow, this is a thing. And my background's going to be perfect for this. So it's a long way of saying I stumbled into Aperian as a long time ago, 2008, an account manager. And if you don't know what Aperian does, if you've missed the other episodes where we've had folks on, we're an intercultural consulting firm that helps clients, organizations, mainly multinationals, but academics, municipalities. We help their employees and their people understand how they work, and then work with others from different work styles, different cultures. So that's what we do in a nutshell. And about a third of our business is global mobility, so supporting assignees. And I've had the pleasure of working there a long time. I think the reason I'm there so long is I love the mission everybody Aperian does, like the two of you. But the work is meaningful. I mean, it really is. Every day is different. And when you finally make that connection, and you guys are on the tip of the spear as trainers, when you help someone understand the why behind the behavior, like now that's why Brett was talking that way and I didn't realize it. Those are what we call the aha moments. And I have them every day with folks, and it's rewarding. So that's my answer.
I'm curious because yes, you're on one end of the spear, and Brett and I, or as Brett described it, we're on the pointy side of that spear. And yet, as individual practitioners, as there are many out there in our industry, including myself, so we work with companies like Aperian. We also work with our own clients, so where we serve in both in the sales function and in the service delivery role. And I'm curious whether this has changed for you in your position, Jesse, over the years. Do you see that the companies, the clients or prospects that you talk to, that they find your approach to be of value immediately, or you're still working through a lot of resistance or rejection around the responses like, well, we don't need this anymore, we've done this in the past, or aren't we all now becoming so much more global, and we all of us, I mean, come on, pandemic, we're all on Zoom all the time, so we've been dealing with internationals forever, we don't need this, or whatever type of rejection you're dealing with. Have you found that selling, quote unquote, or persuading, convincing your prospects of the validity of our work has changed?
I'll answer it in two ways, Christian. I think in some ways it's changed. In some ways it's still not. I think we could all agree that the intercultural work that we do could be termed a soft skill. It's not like, an engineering degree where you buy this software that helps you plan some ROI on a build out. It's a soft skill. So what's the ROI for getting its cultural empowerment, as Brett is saying? And the truth is, it does have real financial implications, but it's hard to sell that on the front end to an HR buyer that says, so why should I take either group training or expat training from you? How's that going to move the needle? It's a cost. You're a cost center to me. And I think if we, in our best selves, we could say, yeah, that is true, but there's data that shows if you give your employees this opportunity to understand, they're going to mitigate mistakes that do have large financial implications. The truth is, we often get pulled into the work we do when things go wrong, right? A failed joint venture, a failed opening of a new plant, a project team that had a lot of different international folks on it that didn't meet its goals. So a lot of time and effort was wasted. And that's when, we know that there was some cultural communication breakdown happening, and we could have avoided that. Let's bring in folks like Christian and his company, or Aperian. That is the truth. I think on the flip side, the more that it percolates throughout an organization, that the work that we do does elevate business, does help you accomplish those goals faster, word spreads within organizations. And then you have companies that are more proactive saying, this is just a best practice. We need to have these programs, whether they're open enrollment, cultural agility programs for everybody, or expat training for those going on an assignment. So I hope that answers your question. It's a little bit of both, Christian.
Yeah, and Brett knows what I'm going to jump on in your answer here is I get that I get the response often that people want to put our work in the basket of what they call soft skills, and I'm okay with that. different things on this program about that terminology, but I let them live in that sphere for a while until I tell them, well, how soft is it really if you don't have it and it negatively affects your bottom line? Would you then agree that it's in fact hard to acquire that skill without the help of professionals, and hard in terms of monetary, fiscally hard if you're having a failed M&A or a failed project because of your lack of this, what you thought was a soft skill, right? So I typically take that energy of softness and I flip it to them and say, so you still want to hold on to that belief that it's soft? So show me your balance sheet of this failed merger that you're working through right now. That's why we're sitting here having this conversation, right? So how much is it costing you not building? And when you said mission and mission driven, I'm curious whether it can be a powerful in that conversation to appeal to a company's mission, because wouldn't it be a fair assumption to presume that a company who wants to expand globally, either by organic growth and going into foreign markets or by acquiring partners abroad, that they're doing this with their corporate mission in mind, that they have a well-formed outcome to doing that, and not only the monetary or the projected monetary gain, right? So reminding them of their mission, is that something that could work in this scenario?
It could. I think it increasingly can for assignees, because everyone's talking about inclusion and diversity these days. It's globally important. But as an assignee, you're not just the ambassador for yourself and your family and trying to advance your career. You're the ambassador for your company. You're the face, if you will, of your company, and bringing not only your best self and trying to understand how culture is impacting, but what your company is doing. And often the mission of a company is tied up in their I&D efforts. But I will also say it's not as easy as that. I mean, we work, as you know, with companies in all industries, and so missions vary. A manufacturing mission statement might be different from a pharmaceutical or whatnot. But I also agree with you on pushing back, Christian, on the soft skill. I'm just very transparent with clients, and in my role, I'm not a trainer, but I talk to clients about the work that we do and why it's important. And it's pretty easy to start giving metrics that the data backs us up on. So we know in the world of global mobility, at least pre-COVID, when there were assignments happening in volume, the data for 30 years has said the number one reason why they fail is due to family issues or intercultural issues related to that, which could have been mitigated. And if someone comes home, the company's just lost $1 million plus easily, right? That's data. Same way on repatriation, like, oh, you don't do that? Well, why not? Well, it's a cost. But then they see the data of 2/3 of people that go on assignment, and you've just spent all that money training them on what they're supposed to do in that host country, onboarding. They've got all this knowledge in their head that you then want them to transfer out to other employees to maybe be a part of your management succession line. And then 2/3 of them leave within 2 years of coming home. Why? Because expectations weren't met. Like, sure, soft skill, repatriation training, but you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars walking out your door because you could have helped them. So when you talk like that, your ears perk up a little bit, and it sells itself often.
And you use the you use the part of the I&D, inclusion, diversity, and let's say equity. I mean, is that's kind of become part of the evolution too of the part of the case of making sure that people that are going to another country understand what does diversity and equity look like in that other country, and it's not just what you're drawing from your home country, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, increasingly, it's the melding of cross-cultural work and inclusion and diversity work are happening underneath each other. I think we would all agree 5, 6, 7 years ago in Fortune 500 companies, there were not that many titular heads of D&I. Those roles didn't even exist. And now you'd be hard pressed to find any company that doesn't have that title now, which is a good thing. Companies are taking this seriously, and they're absorbing the elements of historical cross-cultural training underneath that. But to answer your question, Brett, the reason it's impactful is we have to understand, like, if I'm moving from Chicago and I'm going to Singapore, for example, I'm going to get cultural training on how my work style operates, but I may take some misconceptions of what race and ethnicity mean in America with me to Singapore. And I can guarantee you, intra-Asia, race and ethnicity mean very different things, right? So as you know, Brett, we incorporate a lot of that from our inclusion practice at Aperian. We infuse that in the global mobility, and it's strengthening the work that we do, because now people have even extra tools in their toolkit.
So you're handling the global mobility portion of Aperian Global's work portfolio. Have you noticed any changes in ever since you've been charged with that department, that in the mobility field or the influence pendulum has been swinging towards relocation management companies or away from them to more piecemeal approach to how corporations handle their employee mobility? What's been your experience?
Yeah. And again, I just help manage our global mobility practice. There's an amazing team behind me that helps us do this work. But for sure, there's been an evolution. I think a lot of it's driven by cost, and the proliferation of the value that these relocation companies bring. What I have noticed, and I didn't realize early on in my career at Aperian Global, mobility departments, even at Fortune 500 companies, are often really small. They're short-staffed, and they're asked to do a myriad of things. And it is impossible for a team of 3 or 5 to do the tax, the legal, the work transfer, immigration stuff, the housing. You cannot do it, much less think about cultural training or language training for your employees. So I have seen a trend of the relocation companies, RMCs, get stronger, particularly in Europe. I think Europe has always preferred a more direct client, intercultural vendor approach. But the value of these RMCs is inherent because they become your mobility department. And then so when you get intercultural training through that, we try to explain what it is that we do. And then the other nuance is budgets are tight, even pre-COVID. Everything in the mobility side of the house is more transactional. We need to save money, but we still need to get people to support. There's been a big movement in lump sum offering, which instead of saying we have this policy that might be called gold plated and you get everything if you're going on a 3-year assignment, to we're going to give you a lump sum of X number of $1,000 and you spend it on how you want to prioritize that, making sure you find a house, a school for your kids. And as you can imagine, cultural training might fall down on the list there. So I've seen that evolution for sure in our work. I would say that we have great partnerships through the RMCs, but ultimately we're trying to convey the work that we do to the companies so that their employees know why taking our training or taking a coaching opportunity with us is going to help them succeed on assignment. So
there's certainly my perception, and even recently, and this would be music to both of your ears, I guess, is to have every now and again that little nugget of delight when a senior person in an HR role says, well, actually, I think culture is inherently tied to talent development or talent skills of the person themselves. So that was something I heard the other day, and I thought, wow, that is really the way to approach it. Even for people who are not going on international assignments, right? Internally in an organization now, as they go global, we're looking at people that are kind of given the opportunity to work with people all around the world and even domestically in a multicultural society. So it's a great skill to have. And, and I use we're at the tip of the spear. I mean, as you, Jesse, you said, you're always very humble, and you mentioned your team, and it's a great team. It does take that part. I'm going to call it the rocket. I'm going to go back to the rocket, guys. Come on, the powerhouse of the rocket is where that kind of mission controller, and that's kind of what I see the roles of the Jesse Rowells of the world are doing. So you're doing great work. So what are you seeing of the future? Let's have a look at the great horizon of what we see in the future as drawing on what you've already on the interactions you have with clients now.
Well, you you just mentioned something that is also a trend, and it's a happy trend we're seeing. Yeah, thanks for the rockets. I don't think I realized this early on in my career at Aperian of who are our buyers and how are they differentiated within an organization. But in a lot of Fortune 500 companies, multinationals, you've got global mobility HR that support assignees and working with their relocation partners. They roll up in the org chart under the CFO, oftentimes under compensation and benefits, right? Whereas talent development or inclusion and diversity, leadership development, HR roles go up to the CHRO, CEO kind of part of the org chart. And what I didn't realize is those two groups oftentimes didn't talk with one another. And again, Aperian Global, we do talent development. It doesn't matter if you're an assignee. You also might be an assignee that now has an extended team under you. Your matrix working with people in 10 countries. They may need group training. We're trying to talk about all of that holistically. And then our buyers were like missing one another, right? What Brett was alluded to is we're starting to see more of the global mobility HR talk with talent development holistically within the organization, which is fantastic because assignees are still going to get the support that they need, but now they might be tracked from, oh, we can also then include them on other talent initiatives that our mobility colleagues didn't know about and vice versa. So that's a happy trend I see continuing, Brett.
Does that mean, I mean, that this is a little bit of a leading question then, but does that mean in our field we need to climb the corporate ladder a little more and bark up the tree's crown and not, or to perpetuate Brett's metaphor, do we need to climb into the top cabin of that rocket ship and talk to the captain rather than to the verticals underneath it, to the CHRO or leadership, learning and development and talent development silo versus the mobility financial side silo? Do we need to have different conversations with more top level executives in order to drive our mission into their operations?
Yeah, I think it's a combination that if we're take off our practitioner ad and we're trying to sell the services that we do, sell upward as far as we can go. I think in the world of inclusion and diversity, they have the microphone at this time. They have a spotlight. And so it's a little bit easier to get entree to those buyers. The world of global mobility is a little bit tougher. Their budgets, again, roll up in a different P&L. And, cost is still very, very much a thing. Having said that, when you start talking about, and this is where when you are as a practitioner, you are in the room, you might be training someone who is a country manager head, right? Or the head of that new joint venture, or the head of integrating an acquisition because they just bought a $20 billion company in Germany, right? Or whatever. So those people have tremendous authority in the business. They're not HR people. So you can come at it from your angle. If you help them have those aha moments and they start to put into practice what we as interculturalists teach them on, and they see immediate results, well, guess what? Those people who are driving huge amounts of money and have huge amounts of employees reporting them start looking upward to their leadership and saying, this was incredibly helpful for me. We need to be doing more of this. And that's happening. Brett has seen that happen with folks he's trained. And so you guys and people in my role, we work in tandem to say, look, this is important, but we might come at it in different ways and different value propositions.
It's always been my approach, and I know many of the people we speak to is a team approach from us in the field as the trainers and also the organizations that we draw on the wonderful. I mean, we benefit from all that great material and resources that are built by the wonderful teams that support either global mobility or I&D or a combination of both. So it's, the organizations like Aperian Global are integral to that. And obviously Aperian Global are more focused, they've got that really kind of mission driven, that really focused approach to supplying these materials and resources. So it's to a great degree. Our success, or the success of both of us, kind of is a team effort, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, I talk to many people in our field. Sometimes they're competitors, but at the same time, they might be partners. I think, and I prefer to just operate very transparently and acknowledge that, because we are on the same team, if that team is called intercultural training and consulting. But knowing that there's a big piece of pie of what we do, and we can all, share in that and get our sliver to support our own business and try to grow that. So I think Aperian Global has done a good job of being thought leaders in our field and putting out proprietary online tools and thought leadership around our practice areas that we support, but also going, we don't know everything and we want to partner with others to make this work. Because at the end of the day, again, we need the corporate buyer, the HR buyer wanting our services. If we're all singing that same tune about the value we bring, we all benefit from it.
Or dare I say, the sky is no longer the limit and space is limitless. Growth mindset. There you go. I wrapped that up.
You're a metaphor maniac.
Okay, here are the rockets. There we go.
Cue the rockets. Cue the rockets.
We should get that rocket thing going. In your conversations over the years with your customers, when you said they often come to us, and I think the story is similar to an organization like Aperian or to smaller boutique shops like ours. When they come to you, it's often because something's already gone wrong. What are their? I mean, we can talk about cautionary tales and failed stuff till the cows come home. What are the success stories you would like to report on when you go to a new client or an existing client and say, hey, this is what just happened with client XYZ, and this is how our work had a positive, sustainable impact. Isn't that something that you would want as well? What are some of those stories you can tell?
Yeah, well, in some ways, those instances where there was something that went wrong and it cost a company a lot of money, those clients continue to be clients, and now they're more proactive, but they actually become great client references for us. I think, I don't know the exact percentage, but I would hazard to guess 70 to 80% of the new work that we get from Aperian Global comes from client referrals, people going to another organization, remembering us. But what we're also very transparent as on the sales side, explaining the work that we do. We often say to clients, it would be crazy for you not to maybe doubt working with us or biting off a big statement of work, because you need to see the results for yourself. So while we try to build a business case and maybe run a pilot, why don't you talk to some of our clients that have worked with us? And that has worked really well, because we can let them talk to a client that might say, yeah, we used to do a ton of international mergers and acquisitions and very few worked. And we started doing this intercultural thing, whatever that is, team integration or expat coaching. And it made a huge difference on subsequent acquisitions. So when you get an Aperian's out of that conversation, we just introduce them. And when those peers, if you will, different companies talk to one another and they hear of the value, again, it makes the selling of what we do a lot easier. So as a company, we're pretty good about on the front end, listen, talk to others that have gone through this journey, maybe have felt the pain that we're trying to help you avoid.
I think part of that is the listening part too. I mean, many of the practices that we do are produced, and the ideas come from the clients.
Absolutely.
They know their people, they know their locations, they know their issues. And, it behooves us to listen intently and make sure that we're using, not just kind of giving them a cookie cutter, right? It's not one size fits all. Every individual, every company is different. And we need to listen to them. And they actually often come up with some of the best ideas for us to respond to, and then be able to fit whatever we can supply and package that in an effective way. And I know that's kind of one of the parts of Aperian I like, is that listening part is inherent. And that comes out of those great conversations for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think one of all the work that we do, the consulting work to me, which is less transactional and more talking with companies about how do you avoid these mistakes. For me, mergers and acquisitions has always been Very, very interesting. I think, Christian, you mentioned earlier, yeah, you can have organic growth, but it is harder and harder to be kind of self-funded and grow globally. It's a lot easier to just buy a company. So global M&A is always going to be there. And what, again, I talked a minute ago that the HR buyers are siloed within an organization, but the same thing happens when companies think about buying another firm or merging. You've got the CFO working with outside consultants running the numbers on, we're going to get this much more access to the market, these many more employees. We could probably project our stock price to be this. The deal looks good. They sign the deal, and they hand the integration over to HR, who had nothing to do with putting the deal together. And I've had HR people, heads of HR, say to me, we get handed the crap sandwich, if you will. Not that they don't love the idea of growing, but it's more they have to do the hard work of not only integrating another company that has its own corporate culture, its own system and processes, but oh, by the way, we're an American firm and we just bought a German firm, and that German firm had operations in 11 countries and we had operations in 2. Think of that work, right? It is highly complicated and it is very, very difficult. And of course, mistakes are going to be made, because the biggest asset you have in any company is its people. And when global M&A fails, it's failing because of the human integration of those people. So your asset value is failing, which negates the whole purpose of the buyout in the beginning, right? So to me, I love those conversations because it is, Christian, to your point, it's a more strategic conversation, and there's real data around it. You can look at annually, there's statistics about failed global mergers and acquisitions, but it's all about the work that we do. It's helping, how do you integrate someone from India that's now relocated and leading a merger with a pharmaceutical company that's half Japanese and US American? It's complicated work.
Yep. Yeah. And funny that the example you just brought about this theoretical construct of a US-based company buying something in Europe that's already present in X amount of markets. This happened to us just a couple of months ago. US-based engineering manufacturing company bought out a specialty shop in Germany with a product that is augmenting their present offering. But the German company is present across the Schengen territories in Europe and beyond. We're talking Russia or former Soviet realm. We're talking Northern Africa. We're talking Middle East. So they have tons of tentacles throughout that part of the world. And it was not the US-based company who bought out the German company that approached us. It was the German side who said, well, now we're part of this US firm, and we just want to make sure that we're not making any missteps, and that our relationship will be one that serves us well going forward. And while I applaud them for doing it that way, I was really, and I still am trying to figure out who are the people on the US side to talk to, because apparently they had no motivation to initiate this conversation, nor do they seem to have an interest in having that conversation now. And that's something, while it was good on one end, it begs the question, where was the acquiring party in all of this, and where are they now, right? So sometimes these dynamics can be a little...
Yeah, that happens all the time. And that goes back to the point that in some cases, the work that we do may not be seen as that valuable until something breaks. But it's also like people are moving so quickly. I think in the world of publicly traded companies, like it's a highly competitive capitalist market. And so you're going to do that deal before you're thinking about, oh, which open enrollment workshops could we have on working with the USA for the, I mean, it's just, I'm not blaming the companies fully. It's sometimes they're just always in reaction mode. They're like the hamster on the wheel. And I've gotten to know so many of our HR contacts, and some of them have become good friends, and their day is just stressful day in, day out. So it is almost hard to go, we need to be doing this proactively. And oh, by the way, how do I even get budget for that? It's going to get shut down. I mean, it's not easy.
No.
You said public companies, and I think no, maybe we're going to reserve this for another episode. But the recent, well, it's not even recent. It's the idea of the importance of ESGs. So you've got environment, you've got the environment is the E, G is the government, and in the middle is social, right? And I think that's the leg of the chair that people are saying the data is. I heard people say the data is not there, but what you're saying, Jesse, is the data is there when it comes to culture and it comes to social responsibility in terms of how investors are now looking at companies and their veracity for investing in them is going to be dependent on this three-legged stool, and part of that is an important part. And the data is there. It's kind of frustrated me when I heard that, and I said, I know somebody who's got the data. Jesse has, you know, and no, it's an important part. So I think it just shows that our work is never done, and it's going to be exciting into the future as the world becomes more globally connected. Wouldn't you say, Jesse?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is the part that's also exciting. I think it's just being talked about more than it never did. I think historically, you know, even before social media, employees didn't have much of a say in what maybe the strategic direction was on some of these. But now, especially the younger workers, mission is very important. Social responsibility is very important. And if you want to keep those folks, and we all know right now, it is an employee market. If you want to hop, you can probably hop and get another job. So companies are stressed more than ever to retain their talent, but it's also, they're seeing the actual benefit. The data is starting to speak. So you've got the talent retention and employees speaking up, saying, this is important to me. And then you've got the leadership going, yeah, not only is it important, but it's helping our bottom line. And you've got this fusion of doing the right thing globally. So that's another positive trend I think we're seeing.
Fantastic. Well, great. Thank you very much again for joining us. It's been we've been promising to do this for a long time. It took us 204 episodes to get you on.
I can't help. I mean, doesn't it look like he sits there in a rocket ship? It's
yeah. I'm actually I'm in the pointy part of my house. It's like the capsule of my attic office, ready to go to blast off.
It's that's what's happening.
Thanks for the invite, Chaps. It is always a pleasure.
No problem at all.
Thanks for taking time, Jesse. And Brett, thanks for setting this up. I think it's always refreshing and reassuring for not only us in the industry, but those of you who are watching this because you have an interest in what we're talking about, to hear it from the horse's mouth, to hear it from the provider side, because what's happening in Jesse's world is often to varying degrees happening in the individual practitioner world, or in those of us who run our little boutique businesses. This is relevant across the board. So thanks, Jesse, for taking time.
Absolutely. All right. We'll talk again soon, guys.
Two Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 204 in the can. See you next episode, folks, and type your questions and comments in the chat. Tell us where you're from, as always. We forgot to mention that. We launched right into the episode and didn't think about this. But anyway, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jesse, and we will see you next time. Bye, all.
Ciao.